Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
Let's get right into it because this one is a really fascinating situation.
Oh, absolutely. So picture this. You have just booked what you genuinely think is a dream Spanish getaway. You're expecting, cheap tapas, quiet, romantic cobblestone streets.
The whole authentic vibe, right?
Exactly, the authentic rhythm of this ancient coastal town. And you wake up, you step outside your hotel on like a Tuesday morning, ready to take a leisurely stroll to a local cafe.
Only to find yourself literally shoulder to shoulder with thousands of cruise passengers.
Yes, all fighting for the exact same cup of coffee on the exact same narrow street.
It's a rude awakening for a lot of people.
It really is. So today we are tearing apart the reality of visiting Cadiz, Spain, specifically looking at the travel landscape for 2026 and 2027. If you're planning a trip and want the honest, is it worth it verdict before you book, follow the show on Spotify or Apple.
Because it really is the ultimate question, isn't it? When you're allocating your limited vacation time and, well, your hard-earned money?
Oh, totally. Because on paper, when you look at the massive stack of articles and the pricing sheets we pulled for this deep dive, the surface level appeal of Cadiz is just incredibly obvious.
Right. It offers significantly lower everyday costs than those massive hubs. You compare it to Barcelona or Madrid, and it's night and day.
And crucially, and this is a big one, unlike a lot of other regions in Europe that are aggressively taxing visitors just to curb the numbers, Cadiz currently has no broad Andalusia overnight tourist tax.
Which is huge.
Yeah, it is. So looking through this massive pile of research, it is completely clear why this destination is quietly and honestly sometimes not so quietly dominating alternative travel discussion.
Yes, not the obvious Stain City break.
Right, it's a bit off the beaten path for the average international tourist. But we noticed a massive trap you were about to walk into if you just blindly rely on the headline prices.
I really have to look deeper.
Exactly. So we are going to dig through every single fact, every price, every piece of data from the 2026-27 source brief. No repetitive banter, no fluff, just a merciless, practical due diligence audit on whether this is actually a smart value play.
And the core issue we really need to explore first is this paradox that trips up so many travelers.
It's size thing.
Yeah. There is this inherent assumption that just because a city is smaller or, less globally famous than a massive capital, it automatically equates to a cheaper, frictionless trip.
Which makes sense logically, I guess.
It does, and in a lot of places that might be true, but Cadiz operates under a very, very complex geographical dynamic. I mean, it is a beautiful historic city. It's actually one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in Western Europe.
Right.
But it suffers from this extreme localized crowd compression when a few specific factors collide.
Okay, so I always think of the old town of Cadiz like a sponge, but like a very, very small sponge that can only absorb a finite amount of water.
That's a great way to put it.
Because if you pull up an aerial map of the city, it sits on this incredibly narrow peninsula jutting right out into the Atlantic Ocean. There is simply nowhere for the historic center to expand.
They literally cannot build out.
Exactly. They can't build a new suburb of mega hotels just outside the old walls because just outside the old walls is, well, the ocean.
Right, water on all sides.
Yeah. So when demand spikes, that sponge is instantly saturated.
And that sponge analogy perfectly captures the architectural reality on the ground. The streets in the Old Town are essentially medieval in their layout. They're narrow, they're winding, and they're completely enclosed.
Which is beautiful,
But it becomes a massive complication when we introduce the cruise ship industry. In the maritime tourism sector, Cadiz is what we call a true walk-off port.
Right, and we should probably clarify what that actually means for someone just walking around the city. Because usually when a cruise ship docks at a major port, say Civitavecchia outside of Rome or Le Havre outside of Paris, the passengers are getting onto like a massive fleet of coach buses for a 45-minute or 2-hour journey into the city.
Right, they disperse out into a wider region.
Exactly. But a walk-off port means exactly what it sounds like, doesn't it?
It really does. The cruise terminal in Cadiz is integrated directly into the historic center. I mean, the gangway practically drops passengers right onto the cobblestones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, areas that are probably at the top of your must-visit list, neighborhoods like El Popolo, La Viña, the Cathedral Quarter, Plaza de San Juan de Dios, the Mercado Central, and that famous La Caleta beach. They are literally steps away from the terminal.
So these thousands of passengers are not disappearing into the wider region of Andalusia on distant shuttles. They are stepping directly into the exact same walking route you came to use.
Exactly. They're bottlenecking the exact same tapas bars you are trying to enjoy for lunch.
And the data for 2026 and 2027 shows a really escalating urgency here, doesn't it?
It does. The port authorities are expecting hundreds of cruise calls. And we're talking about massive vessels, including regular scheduled visits by ships like the Belle de Cádiz.
Which brings a ton of people.
Oh, absolutely. To give you a sense of the momentum, passenger traffic through that port was up 19% in just the first 4 months of 2026 alone.
19%.
Yep, compared to the previous year.
In a city that literally cannot grow by a single square foot. That is wild. But here's the thing that makes this deep dive so fascinating. Despite that intense congestion, the headline costs are still incredibly tempting.
They really are.
Like, when we look at the pricing data in the brief, it is almost hard to believe for a Western European coastal city.
The everyday living costs are certainly a stark contrast to the premium you pay in a major hub. For example, if you're relying on public transport to get down the peninsula, it's incredibly cheap. A one-way ticket is sitting at roughly $1.40.
And the coffee culture. You can sit at a gorgeous little plaza, order a cappuccino, and it is going to cost you about $2.20.
That's amazing.
And an espresso is around $1.50. I mean, you try doing that in central Paris or London, and you are paying triple that just for the privilege of sitting down at a table.
Right, exactly. And the grocery prices are equally favorable if you are utilizing the local supermarkets to manage your budget. A liter of milk is around $1.10.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and if you want to pick up a bottle of decent supermarket wine to drink on an apartment balcony, you are looking at about $5.10.
That is just incredible value. Even dining out feels like you have stepped back in time. Grabbing some fast food is roughly $9.20.
Not bad at all.
No. And a casual, inexpensive sit-down meal at a local spot is around $13.20. And even if you decide to go for like a full, proper, three-course restaurant meal, it is going to hover right around $46.
Those numbers are phenomenal.
They really are. That is the value case right there in black and white.
However, that value case relies entirely on your ability to secure affordable accommodation, which is where the finite nature of the city fights back.
Right, the sponge fills up.
Exactly. When the streets get tight, the hotel inventory vanishes and the prices absolutely skyrocket. So looking at the entire landscape, we need to establish a very clear baseline for who should not be going here.
Yes, this is what we call the skip if signal. Listen closely to this. You need to skip Cádiz entirely if your baseline expectation for a Spanish vacation requires frictionless underground resort parking for your rental car.
Just skip it.
Yeah, skip it if you need the security of massive 500-room hotel chains with enormous swimming pools. And most importantly, skip it if you demand guaranteed quiet streets during major local events.
It's just not that kind of place.
No. If you want a sprawling, manicured, purpose-built resort experience, this is absolutely not your city. You will be miserable.
Which leads us directly into understanding the temporal dynamics of the city. Because the physical space that Sponge we talked about is so small, knowing exactly when the city gets squeezed by crowds is arguably the single most important booking decision you will make for this trip.
Because it is not just about, looking up the average temperature on Wikipedia and picking the warmest month, is it?
Not at all. You are battling multiple calendars at once.
Right.
You are dealing with 3 distinct overlapping calendars that dictate whether you get a bargain or whether you get taken for a ride.
Okay, what are they?
You have the local beach season, which drives domestic tourism. You have the cruise traffic we just analyzed, which brings the international volume. And you have event tourism, which entirely reshapes the local economy for weeks at a time.
Let's break down the optimal windows first, like the times when those calendars actually work in your favor. Looking at the notes, the standout periods are April, May, early June, late September, October, and even stretching into parts of November.
Spring is phenomenal because it offers superior walking weather. The heat hasn't, baked the stone yet. So you can explore the old town for hours without that physical exhaustion that comes later in the year.
And autumn. I think autumn is the secret weapon of European travel in general, but specifically here, it is amazing because the ocean has been warming up all summer.
You get the best of both worlds.
Exactly. You get genuine beach access and swimming weather, but you completely avoid the psychological summer premium that every single hotel tacks on during July and August just because the calendar says it's summer.
Right. And then you have the winter months, December, January, February. The prices drop significantly. The cruise traffic thins out. It becomes a very authentic, quiet, local city again.
Which sounds lovely.
It is. It can be a fantastic time to focus on the seafood, the history, and the museums. It is a great escape from the freezing temperatures of Northern Europe or the American Midwest. You just have to be prepared to enjoy the southern Spain sunshine with a light jacket.
Well, hold on. I need to stop you right there because this is exactly the trap people fall into. I see this all the time. And looking at the source material, there is this underlying assumption that southern Spain in February equals a beach holiday. We need to aggressively dispel this myth.
It's a huge misconception.
It is. Cadiz is not on the Mediterranean. It is an Atlantic city.
That is a very, very crucial geographic distinction.
It is everything. People hear Andalusia and they picture 90 degrees, palm trees, and drinking sangria in a swimsuit in January.
Yeah, that's not happening.
No. If you book Cadiz in the middle of winter expecting a tanning resort, you have fundamentally misunderstood where you are going on the map. The Atlantic wind is real. It is phenomenal for walkability. It is incredible for the raw, atmospheric texture of an ancient maritime city. But you are going to freeze on that beach if you treat it like a winter resort.
The Atlantic reality means you pack layers, not just linen. Now, moving from the weather to the event calendar, we have to talk about the absolute worst value windows. Times when the pricing matrix completely detaches from reality.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, the biggest disruptor of the entire year is Carnival.
Carnival in Cadiz is legendary, though. We are talking February or early March, depending on the year, right?
It is. It's a massive, satirical, multi-week street party that completely consumes the city. You've got choirs singing in the streets, elaborate costumes, crowds packed into literally every plaza. It is a phenomenal cultural event.
Seems amazing.
It is, but from a budgeting perspective, it changes the entire accommodation equation.
Oh, let me paint a picture of what happens during Carnival based on the data. A basic, slightly worn-out private room in a 2-star pension that might cost you, say, $45 on a random Tuesday in November will suddenly be demanding $250 a night.
And it will sell out at that price.
Exactly. And the kicker, the noise. You will not sleep. The street party goes until dawn. If you are going to Cadiz specifically to experience Carnival, you must book 6 to 8 months in advance and just accept that you are paying an extreme premium for the chaos.
But if your goal is just a relaxing Spanish city break, and you accidentally book your trip during Carnival without realizing it,
Oh, no.
yeah, it is a financial and logistical disaster. You will pay top-tier prices for a compact city that feels dangerously overloaded, and you will likely be miserable.
Okay, so the second worst value window is the dead of summer.
August.
Right. August in Spain is an institution. It is when the interior of the country, places like Madrid and Seville, which just become unbearably hot, essentially shut down, and everyone migrates to the coast.
They all go to the beach.
Exactly. The promenades along Playa Victoria, the tapas bars in La Viña, the sands of La Caleta, they become fiercely competitive.
So if you wait until like June to book a room for August, you're going to get absolutely slaughtered on the price. You will end up paying premium luxury level rates for a mid-range room that is tiny, overlooks a noisy alley, and is completely inconvenient for what you actually want to do. The value proposition vanishes entirely in August.
And layered over that domestic August rush is the cruise wildcard we discussed earlier. Right, because they don't stop just because it's hot.
No, they don't. Even the peak heat of July and August, you have those massive ships calling in.
Right.
When you combine the domestic vacationers with thousands of day trippers funneling into the Plaza de San Juan de Dios, the Cathedral Quarter, Calle Compañía, and Plaza de las Flores, I mean, the infrastructure simply groans under the weight.
So looking at the data, the actionable booking advice for you is very rigid here. If you are aiming for that sweet spot of spring or autumn, and you want to stay right in the historic Old Town or the La Viña neighborhood, you need to book 2 to 4 months ahead to secure a place that balances price and quality.
But if you are braving Carnival, August, or major holidays like Easter week, you have to push that window out to 6 months ahead minimum.
And for those winter midweek breaks, You definitely have more flexibility. You can be a bit more spontaneous. But never assume that the absolute best boutique rooms with the ocean views are just going to sit there waiting for you at bargain basement prices. The good stuff always goes first.
Always. So let us assume you have navigated the calendar perfectly. You have picked an optimal week in October. You have your flights booked. The immediate reality of touching down and physically navigating your way into the city is what will dictate the success of your first 24 hours.
And the arrival logistics for Cadiz are actually quite interesting because it doesn't have its own massive international airport right on the edge of town.
Right.
The closest airport is Jerez.
Jerez is incredibly convenient geographically, but the flight options can be quite thin. Depending on where you are originating from, you might struggle to find a direct flight, or the scheduling might force you into awkward layovers.
Yeah, so the more common choice is Seville Airport. It has a much deeper inventory of flight choices, a lot more international connections, and generally just better pricing.
But the catch is the land transfer.
Right. You land in Seville and you still have to factor in the time and cost of getting down to the coast, usually by train or bus.
You can even fly into Madrid if you are using the high-speed rail network to build a broader multi-city Spain itinerary. But regardless of where you fly into, if you are arriving in Cadiz by rail, you are in for a very pleasant surprise regarding the station location.
It is brilliant. The Cadiz railway station sits right on the port-facing edge of the historic city. Arriving there is incredibly painless compared to places where the train station drops you in some soulless, distant suburb miles from the center. You walk out the front doors of the station and you are immediately looking at the old city walls.
That's a great first impression.
It is. But this brings us to a massive logistical trap that catches so many people off guard. I call it the walkability paradox.
The walkability paradox is fascinating because it pits the defining feature of the city against the reality of modern travel luggage. I mean, the Old Town is, without question, incredibly walkable. If you draw a circle from the train station to San Juan de Dios, through the El Populo neighborhood, over to the Cathedral and into the Mercado Central, you absolutely do not need a car.
But have you ever tried dragging 50 pounds of hard-shell luggage over 300-year-old cobblestones?
It is a nightmare.
It sounds so romantic until a wheel snaps off 3 blocks from your hotel. And it is not just the streets. These historic buildings in the center rarely have modern elevators. You might be hauling that bag up 3 flights of narrow, twisting, tiled staircases.
Oh, absolutely. Navigating those pedestrian lanes and staircases with heavy luggage creates immediate, intense friction the moment you arrive. You can, of course, use taxis to solve that initial first-mile problem. There's a rank right outside the station.
And the taxis are very reasonable. The starting fare drops at about $2.70, and then it ticks up at roughly $1.10 per kilometer. It is a really cheap way to save your back.
Yeah, but here's the catch. If you book a hotel that is so deeply buried in the pedestrian zone that the taxi can only get you halfway there, you are still dragging those bags.
That's a great point.
Furthermore, if you find yourself relying on taxis every single day of your trip just to get out of your neighborhood, you have entirely defeated the purpose of choosing a compact, walkable city. You should be utilizing the cheap public transport, that $1.40 bus ticket, only when your legs truly give out after a long day of exploring.
And we have to bring the cruise ships back into the picture for your arrival morning. Because of that walk-off convenience, the vibe of the city can change in the blink of an eye. You might step out of your apartment at 8:30 in the morning, and the street is this peaceful, romantic corridor. You can hear the ocean, you can smell the bakeries.
By 10:30.
Yeah, when the gangways have opened, that exact same street morphs into a dense, loud tour group corridor.
The arrival verdict, synthesizing all these logistics, is quite binary. It is incredibly easy and atmospheric if you arrive by train, carrying light, manageable luggage, and you have booked a centrally located stay on a main artery.
But if you arrive in a rental car, packed to the roof with massive suitcases, expecting to just easily cruise into the Old Town, find street parking right outside your boutique hotel, and smoothly roll your bags into a lobby elevator, it is going to be a total, unmitigated disaster.
Which logically forces us to examine where you are actually taking those bags. That initial luggage friction leads directly to the single most critical logistical choice of your entire trip.
Yeah.
Accommodation.
Where exactly are you sleeping?
Right.
You sent us 5 different traveler profiles to analyze, so let's break the accommodation landscape down for each one, starting with the backpackers and budget-conscious travelers.
If you are aggressively managing your budget, you are looking at spending roughly $35 to $85 a night.
The best zones for that price bracket are going to be the outer edges of the old town, specifically near the train station, the El Populo neighborhood, and the streets radiating out from the Mercado Central, places like Calle Plosha or around the Plaza de San Juan de Dios.
You're mostly looking at hostels there.
Yeah, you are going to be looking at hostel dorm beds or very basic, no frills, private rooms in older buildings.
And you have to understand the trade-off you're making at that price point. You are prioritizing a cheap bed and immediate walking access to the sites, but you are sacrificing acoustic comfort.
Oh, the noise.
You will hear the street noise, you will hear the garbage trucks early in the morning, and honestly, the plumbing might be older than you are.
Fair enough. Moving up a tier to mid-range couples.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of our listeners sit. In the shoulder seasons, spring and autumn, you're looking at spending between $110 to $220 a night.
The strongest zones for mid-range couples are the atmospheric heart of the city. You want to look at Viña, the Cathedral Quarter, and that beautiful, slightly grander area between the Mercado Central and Parque Genovese.
You have some really charming options in this bracket. Places like Hotel Argentonio, which has incredible Moorish design elements, or Hotel Las Cortes de Cádiz, which leans heavily into the 1812 Constitution history. You also have a ton of beautifully renovated boutique apartments around Plaza Mina.
But again, there's a fundamental trade-off. In Cádiz, the most picturesque, romantic, atmospheric streets are very often the loudest streets in the city.
That's the trap right there.
It is. If your balcony overlooks a famous tapas alley in Viña, you are going to be listening to people enjoying those tapas until 2 in the morning.
Right. Now, what about families? Let's say you are a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 kids. Squeezing into the historic core is remarkably difficult. The rooms are simply too tight, and combining 2 historic rooms is incredibly expensive.
For a family needing space, you are looking at $140 to $300 a night. And you are honestly better off abandoning the old town entirely.
Really?
Yeah, you need to look at the newer, modern half of the peninsula along Playa Victoria or the newer seafront.
Okay, so you are looking at places like the Hotel Playa Victoria, the Occidental Cadiz, or renting a modern, spacious apartment along Avenida Amilcar Barca or the Paseo Maritimo.
The trade-off for families choosing the newer seafront is access. You gain space, you gain modern air conditioning, you gain elevators for strollers, and you get direct access to a massive, wide, sandy beach.
But you lose the history.
Right. You are no longer stepping out of your front door into the historic sites. You will be relying on buses or committing to much longer, sweatier walks to get into the historic core.
Finally, we have the luxury traveler profile. If your budget is flexible, you are in the $220 to $450 a night range. And I have to be completely honest here based on the data. True luxury options in Cádiz are severely limited.
It is just not a luxury-dense destination. The anchor for high-end space, sweeping views, and modern facilities is the Parador de Cádiz.
Right.
It sits right on the edge of the water near Parque Genovese and La Caleta.
It's gorgeous, though.
It is a stunning, ultra-modern building that provides a massive contrast to the old city behind it.
But if you book that, or one of the few high-end boutique spots, you have to manage your expectations. You are paying luxury prices to secure personal comfort, a pool, and ocean views. But you are not buying into a deep, extensive luxury ecosystem.
No, you're really not.
This isn't Marbella or the Amalfi Coast. You aren't going to step out of the Parador and find streets lined with high-end designer boutiques and Michelin-starred tasting menus on every corner. The luxury is contained entirely within your hotel walls.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The luxury is internal, not external.
And before we move on to the food, I want to aggressively dispel a myth about accommodation here. I hear travelers say all the time, oh, it's a small city, you can walk it in 40 minutes, just stay anywhere.
Oh, that's a mistake.
Absolutely not. A small city actually amplifies your brand choices.
How so?
Because in a massive city like London or New York, if your hotel neighborhood is a bit loud, you can escape to a quiet park or a different borough for the day. In Cádiz, you are boxed in.
We're trapped on the peninsula.
Exactly. If you book a cheap top-floor apartment with a weak AC unit in the middle of August, you will bake. If you pick a picturesque, narrow lane that happens to echo every late-night conversation and slamming door until 3 a.m., you cannot escape it. That single bad choice defines your entire trip because your physical space to retreat is so limited.
Every compromise is felt intensely in a compact space. That is the golden rule of Cádiz. And that leads us perfectly into how you feel yourself while navigating that space. Food, groceries, and etiquette.
Yes.
Once you are settled in whatever room you chose, Managing your daily meals is where the financial value of Cadiz is either fully maximized or completely squandered.
The food scene here is incredible, but it is highly localized. Let's map out the key zones. The absolute beating heart of the city's culinary life is the Mercado Central de Abastos. It is not just a place to buy tomatoes, it is an institution.
It really is the center of everything.
You have the traditional market stalls selling the morning's catch of seafood and local produce, but the perimeter is lined with a fantastic food court focusing on tapas, cured meats, and the city's famous fried fish.
Beyond the market, you have La Viña, which is the traditional, slightly gritty but incredibly authentic neighborhood for classic tapas.
Yeah.
You have Calle de la Palma, which is essentially a long corridor of outdoor tables perfect for evening dining under the palm trees.
Sounds idyllic.
It is. You have Plaza de las Flores, which is ideal for central snacking, grabbing some churros, or a quick coffee.
And then you have the Cathedral area. Now, the Cathedral area is undeniably gorgeous and incredibly convenient if you are sightseeing. But you have to keep in mind that the restaurants directly facing the cathedral are very often much more tourist-facing in their pricing and their quality.
You pay for the view.
Exactly. You are paying a premium for the view of the dome, not necessarily for the best food in the city.
For travelers who want to aggressively control their budget, especially those staying in apartments utilizing the supermarkets, is essential. You have plenty of access to major Spanish chains like Mercadona, Carrefour Express, and Dia, alongside countless independent local fruit and vegetable shops scattered throughout the Old Town.
You asked for a merciless audit of the pricing, so let's execute the grocery data right now, because this is where the math really works in your favor. Imagine walking into a local Mercadona to stock up your apartment. You want some good local cheese. You are looking at around $12 for an entire kilo.
That is a massive block of cheese.
It really is. If you are cooking dinner, a half kilo of chicken breast is roughly $3.75.
Unbelievable.
You want to make breakfast? A dozen eggs is about $4.63. Beautiful, fresh, local tomatoes are around $1.78 a kilo.
$1.78 for a whole kilo.
Yeah. Potatoes are $1.55 a kilo. You can walk into a local bakery and get enough fresh bread for two people for just $1.11. What makes Cadiz unique is that it's still a functioning local city, not just a hollowed-out tourist trap. You can genuinely feed two people a massive breakfast for under $6.
And the beverage costs in the supermarkets reflect that local reality, too.
Yep.
If you want a domestic Spanish beer from the grocery shelf, it is going to be about $1.30.
Wow.
If you insist on a known premium imported brand, maybe $2.30.
But you don't fly to Spain just to eat eggs in your apartment, right? When you eat out, the value is still there if you know how to order. If you sit down for a basic lunch menu, the traditional menu del dia, where you get a starter, main, drink, and dessert, it is hovering right around $19.
But the real cultural and financial strategy in Andalusia is eating tapas. The pricing on tapas can be confusing for international visitors. You might see a chalkboard menu displaying prices in euros, but for your mental math, treat $3 to $6 as your expected range for a small plate.
That tapa strategy is vital. You order 2 or 3 plates, a beer, and you move on to the next place. But while we are at the table, we really need to touch on the etiquette, specifically tipping.
Yes, the tipping culture in Spain is vastly different from North America. It is not the US 20% model.
Don't just auto-tip 20%.
Exactly. You do not automatically calculate and add a 20% gratuity to every casual bill. If you have a coffee or a quick beer, you might leave the small change. If you have a sit-down meal with good service, leaving a couple of euros or rounding up the bill by 5 to 10% is perfectly acceptable and appreciated.
Leaving a 20% tip on a $5 tapas order just marks you as a confused tourist. But honestly, the real hazard with dining in Cadiz isn't the tipping culture. The real hazard is the timing.
The timing is critical because it intersects directly with the cruise ship schedules. If you attempt to eat lunch near the Central Market or in the plaza surrounding the cathedral between 1:00 p.m. and 3:00 p.m. on a day when thousands of passengers are in port, you are going to have a bad time.
It is pure chaos. You are going to experience long, frustrating waits for tables. The kitchens get completely overwhelmed by the sudden spike in volume, which means the quality of the food often drops, and ultimately you are paying a premium for a very poor experience.
This is where you have to implement a strategy.
I call it counter-programming your stomach.
I love that.
Do not eat when the massive crowds eat. You have to break your normal habits. Hit the Mercado Central early, maybe 10:00 a.m., for a coffee and a quick bite before the massive swell of day trippers arrives. Then, lean into the Spanish schedule, have your proper sit-down lunch much later in the afternoon, around 3:03 or 4:00 p.m., when the cruise passengers are being corralled back to the port for departure.
And for dinner.
For dinner, you get entirely away from those main polished arteries that connect the port to the cathedral. You head deep into La Viña. You eat where the locals are eating at 9:30 at night.
Counter-programming your stomach is excellent advice, and it sets up our next major analysis perfectly. We have established the room rates, we have walked through the grocery prices, and we have outlined the dining strategies. Now it is time to run a merciless daily math audit for the 5 specific traveler profiles you asked us to evaluate.
Grab a notebook or pull up your spreadsheet, because we are breaking down every single dollar to give you a realistic daily number.
Profile 1, the backpacker. Your goal is to keep costs absolutely minimized. You are aiming for a total daily spend of $75 to $115.
Here is how that breaks down. Your accommodation in a hostel dorm or basic room on the edge of the Old Town is going to take up $35 to $65 of that budget. Your food budget is lean $20 to $35. You are making this work by eating bakery breakfasts, grabbing cheap produce from the market, and maybe hitting one casual tapas spot in the evening.
Your transport costs are almost non-existent, maybe $3 to $8, mostly just the occasional bus down to the newer part of town, since you are walking everywhere else.
Right, use those feet.
Yeah. Your attractions budget is $0 to $15. You are relying on the incredible free assets of the city. The free beaches, walking the sea walls, and visiting free sites like the Roman Theater.
Throw in a $10 buffer for a random coffee or a pharmacy run, and your comfortable, realistic number is $95 a day. But listen to me carefully. This entire budget falls apart and becomes terrible value if you do not plan ahead and are forced to pay inflated, last-minute private room rates during a peak week or carnival. If you get caught out, that $95 day instantly becomes a $200 day.
Profile 2, the mid-range traveler or couple. This is the sweet spot for Cádiz. You are looking at spending $115 to $190 per person. So combined, a couple is spending $230 to $380 per day.
Your accommodation share is $55 to $110 per person, securing you a nice boutique room in La Viña or near Plaza Mina. Your food budget steps up significantly to $40 to $70 per person. That gives you a proper cafe breakfast, a nice tapas lunch with drinks, and a relaxed sit-down dinner.
Transport is $5 to $20 per person, factoring in a few more taxis when you are tired. Attractions and guided tours will take up $15 to $40 of your daily budget.
And a little extra padding, right?
Always. Add a buffer of $15 to $30. Your comfortable, realistic number is roughly $150 per person per day.
When we see couples blow past this budget, the overruns almost always happen in 3 specific areas. They go really heavy on premium, weight-priced seafood dinners at the nice restaurants. Or they opt for the most expensive boutique rooms with ocean views. Or they start adding daily guided excursions out to the White Villages, which requires car rentals or train tickets.
Profile 3, the family of 4. 2 adults, 2 kids. This is a much bigger financial swing. You are looking at $330 to $650 a day for the entire family.
Accommodation is the massive variable here. It will cost $150 to $320 for a family room, or renting a full apartment out near Playa Victoria. Your food budget is $110 to $190, and that is assuming you are being smart, mixing grocery store breakfasts in the apartment with casual restaurant meals for lunch and dinner.
Transport for a family jumps to $15 to $50. Because you are staying out near Playa Victoria to get the space, you will be using the buses constantly to get into the Old Town, and you will inevitably use taxis when the kids are absolutely exhausted.
Oh, sure.
Attractions are $25 to $90 a day.
The buffer for a family needs to be significantly higher, $30 to $70. You need that for ice creams on the promenade, sudden pharmacy runs for sunscreen, buying cheap beach gear, or that exact moment when everyone is melting down and you just need to jump in a taxi immediately. A realistic, comfortable number for a family of 4 outside of the peak August wakes is $475 a day.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah, and for a 5-day trip, expect a total of $1,650 to $3,250, and that does not include your flights.
Profile 4, the luxury traveler. If you want the absolute best the city has to offer, you are spending $350 to $750 per person per day.
Accommodation takes up a massive chunk of that. $150 to $300 per person to stay at the Parador or the top-tier boutique suites. Your food budget jumps to $90 to $180. You are drinking better wine, eating the best local tuna, and not looking at the prices on the menu. Transport and private airport transfers will cost $40 to $100. Experiences, spas, and private guided tours add $75 to $200.
But the critical warning here remains exactly what we discussed earlier. At this price point, you are buying personal comfort, great views, and exclusivity. You are not buying massive, sprawling resort infrastructure because it simply does not exist on this tiny peninsula.
Finally, Profile 5, the digital nomad. We are shifting from daily to monthly budgets here. A solo remote worker is looking at $2,600 to $5,200 for a month-long stay. Now, if you look at some of those automated digital nomad platform estimates online, they will quote you $5,000 plus, because they're calculating hotel medians sitting at $86 a night. But let's look at a self-managed, realistic apartment setup.
A self-managed reality looks like this. $1,400 to $2,500 for 1 month's apartment rental, assuming you negotiate or lock it in early. Groceries and eating out will be roughly $450 to $750 for the month. Transport is $50 to $120. Accessing co-working spaces and buying daily coffees in cafes will run $200 to $500. Add a $300 to $600 buffer for weekend trips or emergencies.
So a comfortable monthly number is around $3,400. It is a fantastic place to base yourself if you want walkability, ocean air, and great seafood. But I would advise you to skip Cádiz if you are a remote worker who requires a deep, hyperactive, networking-heavy co-working scene. The tech community here is small. It is for independent workers who want a quiet life, not relentless networking events.
Now, we need to address the structural bottlenecks of the city. Because even if you calculate that daily budget perfectly down to the final cent, it will completely collapse if you step into one of the city's 3 massive logistical traps.
These traps are brutal because they seem so innocuous until you are caught in them. Let's start with trap number 1, the walk-off cruise compression trap.
The mechanism here is what we described at the start of the deep dive. Thousands of passengers step right off the gangway and immediately into the tightest, most historic parts of the Old Town. Juan de Dios, the Cathedral Square, the narrow path to La Caleta.
The cost of falling into this trap isn't always direct money, though it certainly can be. The real cost is the massive loss of your limited vacation time. It is the loss of uncrowded photo access to sites you flew thousands of miles to see.
Yeah, you can't even get a picture without 50 people in it.
Exactly. And financially, it can cost you $20 to $80 per person if you get so frustrated by the crowds that you spontaneously book an unnecessary paid tour or jump in a taxi just to escape the congestion and get to the other side of the peninsula.
The fix for this trap requires active planning. You must check the Port Authority cruise schedules online before you plan your daily itinerary. If there are massive ships in port, do your visit to the Torre de Vera right when it opens in the morning. Push your visit to La Caleta and the tranquil Parque Genovese to the late afternoon when the crowds recede. And honestly, if your tolerance for crowds is incredibly low and you only have 1 day allocated for Cádiz, skip it entirely if there are 3 ships in port that day.
Trap number 2 is one of my favorites to warn people about because it causes so much misery, the Old Town parking trap.
The mechanism here is a classic travel error. A traveler is doing a broad driving tour of Andalusia. They rent a car in Seville. They book a quaint, romantic, old-town hotel deep in the historic center of Cádiz, and then they arrive. And they suddenly realize the Old Town is fundamentally, aggressively anti-car.
It's just not built for them.
No. The streets are incredibly narrow, many are strictly pedestrian only, and public paid parking is severely limited and extremely tight.
It is like renting a massive storage locker that you physically cannot walk to and then paying $35 a day for the privilege of not being able to use it. That is the cost. It adds $20 to $35 a day to your budget just to stable the car in an underground lot on the edge of town, plus an immense amount of stress trying to navigate one-way alleys while hundreds of pedestrians glare at you for ruining their walk.
The fix is simple. If you must have a car, stay near the known, accessible underground parking lots on the very edges of the Old Town, or choose to stay in Playa Victoria, where vehicle logistics are perfectly normal. But the best fix. Use the regional trains to get down to Cádiz, enjoy the walkable city without a vehicle, and only rent a car on the exact day you are leaving the city to continue your road trip.
Trap number 3 is purely financial, the Carnival and August room rate trap.
The mechanism here is entirely psychological. Travelers read articles or listen to deep dives like this one, and they hear about the cheap, everyday food prices. They hear about the $1.30 beer and the $1.11 bread, and they naturally assume the hotel rates will follow suit and offer incredible bargains year-round. But then they try to book a room for the second week of August or during the height of Carnival, and they find the peak rates have doubled or even tripled from the baseline.
The cost of this trip is a $300 to $800 overspend across a simple 4-night stay. It completely destroys the value proposition of choosing Cadiz over a bigger city.
The fix is to ruthlessly clarify your own goals for the trip. Is this trip event-led, meaning you must see Carnival? Is it beach-led, meaning you demand August heat? Or is it value-led? If your priority is value, you must avoid those peak months entirely. If your hard budget ceiling is under $120 a night, you simply have to skip those peak windows or you will end up in a terrible room.
So, assuming you have dodged the cruise ship crowds, you didn't rent a useless car and you booked in October to avoid the price spikes. If you manage to navigate those logistical traps, what is the everyday psychological reality on the ground? What is the safety and comfort level like?
Let's address the real risks versus perceived risks. There is no dramatic, violent crime panic in Cadiz. It is a very safe European city in that regard. The real risks you face are environmental and circumstantial. It is petty theft in the dense crowds around the cathedral. It is severe heat and hydration issues if you try to march around the stone streets in the dead of summer. It is leaving your phone and wallet unattended on your towel at the beach. And it is late-night judgment errors after too much cheap wine.
For solo female travelers, the feedback is overwhelmingly positive. Cadiz is often described as feeling much easier and less intimidating than massive, sprawling cities. The movement is contained and compact, and the evening culture is incredibly social, vibrant, and public. Everyone is out walking.
But caution is still required, as it is anywhere. Do not confuse a busy street with a risk-free street. Keep your bags zipped and crossbody around the main bottleneck areas. San Juan de Dios, the cathedral, the Mercado Central, and the crowded beaches. And at night, stick to the active, well-lit routes in La Viña and Plaza rather than deciding to take a shortcut down a dark, empty medieval lane to save 3 minutes of walking.
For families, the comfort level is highly dependent on your geography. As we mentioned, it is very high if you are based in Playa Victoria. You have physical space, you can push a stroller down the wide promenades, you have room to breathe.
But the Old Town?
The Old Town is significantly less forgiving. You are dealing with steep stairs, high noise levels at night, and you really have to plan around the intense July and August heat. Because kids will inevitably want to be out at the beach exactly when the midday sun is at its most punishing.
My overarching analysis on safety and comfort is this. Scams and profound dangers are not structural to the city. The main irritations are simply overpaying for mediocre food near tourist bottlenecks. The public transport is very safe if you're using official taxis and the train network. The discomforts you might face are purely manageable frictions related to the heat, the localized crowds, and the inherent physical limitations of a historic, walled city.
Okay, we have covered the logistics, the budgets, and the traps. If your comfort and safety are intact, we finally need to look at what actually delivers on the hype. Because you look at the Instagram tags for Cádiz and it looks like a flawless golden hour paradise. What looks way better online than it does in reality. Let's do the highlights and the honest disappointments.
Let's start with the genuine highlights, the moments that justify the trip. La Caleta Beach is magical, but with a major caveat. It is magical specifically early in the morning before the crowds arrive or late in the evening as the sun sets over the castle. Walking through the narrow atmospheric streets of La Viña and emerging straight down onto that beach is an incredible cinematic experience.
The Mercado Central, as we noted, is fantastic, but only if you get there before the midday swell. Watching the fishmongers work is fascinating.
For attractions, the Torre Tavira and its camera obscura are absolutely worth the time and the roughly $8 adult ticket. A camera obscura uses lenses and mirrors to project a live, moving image of the city onto a concave screen in a dark room. It's a brilliant way to understand the layout of the city from above, but you must book your time slot in advance.
The Cadiz Cathedral and the Clock Tower, which run about $8 to $9 for entry, give you stunning views of the dome and the ocean. The Roman Theater is an amazing surprise. It is one of the oldest and largest in Spain. It is partially excavated right under the medieval city, and it is free or very low cost to enter. which is incredible value for an ancient site.
It's a huge bonus.
Yeah, and honestly, just walking through the manicured Parc de Genovese and strolling along the seafront route to Campo del Sur, those are zero-ticket experiences that completely define the joy of the trip.
But we promised an honest, merciless audit, so we have to discuss the honest disappointments.
Yes, and we have to start with La Caleta again. It looks sweeping, grand, and pristine in tightly cropped, filtered photos, but it is actually quite small. And in the middle of summer, it gets overcrowded to the point of being genuinely uncomfortable. You are practically sitting on the towel of the person next to you.
Another major disappointment for many travelers is the Old Town noise. We have mentioned it, but it cannot be overstated for light sleepers. The acoustics of narrow stone streets amplify every single sound. And many of those charming, historic Old Town apartments. They photograph beautifully for the booking websites, but they function poorly in reality. You might be dealing with tiny, cramped bathrooms, absolute zero cross-ventilation airflow, and painfully steep stairs.
Also, if you are a traveler looking for high-end luxury shopping, massive department stores, or a polished, manicured resort feel, you will be deeply disappointed. The shopping is functional and local. And please do not overpay for generic, overpriced walking tours. The city is intuitive and small enough that you can map it and navigate the history independently with a good guidebook.
To synthesize this section, travel photography often intentionally hides the brutal realities of the location. It hides the fierce summer wind, the levante that can blast sand into your face. It hides the extreme, suffocating midday heat in August. It hides the narrow, treacherous staircases, and it hides the laundry hanging off the balconies right next to your scenic, romantic view.
But I would argue that raw texture, the laundry, the peeling paint, the narrow streets is exactly what makes Cadiz a superior alternative to those polished, sterile, purpose-built Mediterranean resorts. It feels deeply lived in. It feels like a real functioning city, not just a stage set for tourists.
That is a very fair counterpoint. The authenticity is the draw. But if the lack of a sprawling resort feel or the looming threat of that cruise ship crowd compression sounds like an absolute deal breaker for the listener, we need to provide options. Let's pivot to the two most viable regional alternatives in Andalusia.
Alternative 1. Jerez de la Frontera. It is just inland from Cadiz.
Why choose Jerez? Because it has significantly lower accommodation pressure. It doesn't have the finite geographical limits of a peninsula. It offers an incredible, deep-rooted sherry and flamenco culture, and it is strategically very easy to use as a central base for day trips around the wider region.
The cost difference is notable, too. If you are comparing apples to apples, accommodations in Jerez are roughly $20 to $80 per night cheaper than staying in the Cadiz Old Town. That is a massive saving over a week.
The trade-off, of course, is geographic. Jerez is far superior if you prioritize wine tasting, spacious hotels, and calm evenings. But it is much worse for immediate beach access. You are inland. You are not waking up, grabbing a coffee, and walking 3 minutes to the ocean. You have to drive or take the train to see the water.
Alternative 2 is further down the coast, Malaga.
Why choose Malaga? Because it operates on a completely different scale. You get a massive international airport with cheap, direct flights from everywhere. You get deep, extensive hotel inventory ranging from budget to true 5-star luxury. You have world-class museums like the Picasso Museum, broad, sprawling nightlife, and incredibly easy, frictionless logistics.
But the cost difference swings violently the other way. While the initial flights into Malaga might be cheaper because of the volume, the central hotels and restaurants can easily run $30 to $120 more per night than what you would pay in Cadiz. You are paying a premium for that infrastructure.
The trade-off here is ultimately choosing logistics over intimacy. Malaga is a big city, cosmopolitan experience. It's polished, but it can feel a bit more generic because it caters to such a massive international crowd. Cadiz is a smaller, lower-key, slightly raw Atlantic wander.
Which brings us to our final act. We have looked at every piece of data in your brief, bringing all the facts, the detailed prices, the traps, and the alternatives together. It is time to deliver the final scorecard.
Let us run through the final verdicts for each profile. For the backpacker, we give Cadiz a 7 out of 10. The key number to remember is $75 to $115 a day. It is absolutely worth it if you go outside of peak season and enjoy the free historic sites, but you should skip it entirely if your travel style relies on rolling into a city and finding a cheap last-minute room because they simply will not be there.
For the mid-range traveler or couple, it is a very strong 8 out of 10. The key number here is $230 to $380 per couple per day. It is a fantastic, highly atmospheric alternative to the more obvious expensive Spanish cities, provided you are organized enough to book early in the spring or autumn to avoid the heat and the crowds.
For the family of 4, it scores a 6 out of 10. The key number is $330 to $650 a day. It works well enough if you have older kids, you want a beach holiday, and you stay out near Playa Victoria. But if you are toddlers and are trying to manage strollers, you will likely hate the steep stairs, the exhausting heat, and the painfully compact rooms in the historic center.
For the luxury traveler, it is a 5 out of 10. The key number is $350 to $750 per person per day. It is a great stop for a night or two for the ocean views and the location at the Parador, but it is a bad choice if you are booking a week-long trip expecting Marbella-level resort infrastructure, high-end shopping, and flawless luxury service ecosystems.
And finally, for the digital nomad or solo traveler, it is a 7 out of 10. The key number is $2,600 to $5,200 a month. It is a great affordable base for independent remote workers who want walkability and daily beach breaks. But skip it if you are moving abroad specifically to network and need a hyperactive, event-heavy co-working scene.
So, the overall verdict. Book carefully. Looking at all your notes, Cadiz is an incredibly strong value play for 2026 and 2027 as a lower-pressure, authentic Atlantic City break. If you meticulously plan your timing before you pull out your credit card, you must avoid the traps. Wait or pivot entirely to jazz if you find yourself trapped by the calendar during Carnival, the August domestic rush, or late-booked peak summer weekends.
It all comes back to the architectural reality of the city. It all comes back to that sponge analogy. You have to know exactly when the city is too saturated to absorb you comfortably and plan accordingly.
I think we have successfully audited every single piece of that brief.
Indeed we have. And before we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that speaks to the future of destinations like this. When an ancient Atlantic port's primary daily rhythm becomes increasingly dictated by the massive, synchronized influx and outflux of international cruise passengers, does it remain a true living city for its residents? Or does it slowly, inevitably transform into a carefully curated maritime museum?
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
Thanks for listening.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.